We are, in a sense, not directly, but we are indirectly still working on their issues, but it's more like we're trying to dismantle patriarchy.
Yeah, I set fire to your crops. So, in a direct sense, I'm starving you, but in an indirect sense, I'm helping you get your crops off. I'm helping you harvest. All right, so what do we have here? Does feminism work on men's issues? A discussion between Big Red and Cassie Jaye.
A lot of MRAs say that there is no point to feminism, that it's achieved what it needed to achieve, and now
it's no longer relevant. Yeah. Tell that to all the victims of rape culture.
There are a lot of different arguments to be made about feminist rape culture and their use of the term rape culture. I'm going to use an argument that is purely a men's rights argument. There's no, it's not an anti-feminist argument. It is a men's rights argument. Right now, in the States, 10,000 boys a year are sexually abused by staff in juvenile detention facilities. By way of comparison, 12,000 By way of comparison, 12,000 men have come forward as victims of the pedophile Catholic priest scandals. 12,000 men since 1950s. 10,000 boys are being abused a year in the juvenile detention facilities in the US. And the government knows that this is happening. This is happening on the government payroll. So we have a government that knows that this is occurring and chooses to ignore it. It has not just choose to ignore it, but chooses to hide the fact. Because ever since it found out that, guess what, 90% of the people engaging in the abuse are women, it stopped tracking the sex of the abusers. So it's actively engaged in a cover-up of how it's paying sexual predators to prey on some of the most vulnerable people in our society. This could be considered a form of sex trafficking, paid for by the government, hidden by the government, covered up by the government. And why? Because the abusers are women and the victims are boys. If you can find anything like that being done to girls, we basically traffic in boys' sexuality, and the government turns a blind eye to it. And this is right in government statistics. It's an institutional practice. Institutionalized. And we don't care. That's a rape culture. And none of the treatment that we do towards girls is at all comparable. So good luck with that one. If you want to talk about rape culture, I suggest you restrict yourselves to male victims. Or you're morally bankrupt. And if you're going to argue that rape culture doesn't apply to male victims, more than female victims, when there's situations like this occurring, I would suggest that you are a hypocrite. And that's the men's rights defense against rape culture. The term rape culture either refers to male victims to a greater degree than female, or it's a pointless artifact of an attempt of cultural authoritarianism.
Tell that to all the people who are still suffering like a wage inequality. When you look at the CEOs, the top earning CEOs, they're making like hundreds of millions of dollars per year when they're male. But then when you look at the top earning female CEOs, they're making maybe 50 million. So, I mean, really, yeah, okay, fine. Their companies are going to be different. There's going to be different dynamics in each position. I get that, but they're still fucking CEOs. They're still running the joint. There shouldn't be that huge of a discrepancy between male and female.
Yes, men are the people who make the majority of the money. They're also the people who pay the majority of the taxes. And guess what? they're the group that gets the least amount of government services. The group that's the largest in terms of productive and the least expensive in terms of, or I wouldn't say least expensive, but we can, as a society, tolerate giving them less in terms of government services. And if that wasn't so, our governments would be bankrupt. And the only statistics I've seen, the only time someone with access to government statistics ever looked at how much the government pays in terms of women's only services versus men, found that it was 200 times more. Women get 200 times more money from taxes than men, even though men pay more in taxes. In any other society, if there was a productive group that was paying more, but the government was taking their money and giving it to another group of people by law or through social programs, we would call that first group of people by a particular name. Particular name that they aren't entitled to their own earnings, to the full amount of their own earnings, and that the government favors giving their product to another group that hasn't created it. There's a name that we use for people like that.
So, those are just examples. And there's still a lot of sexism in terms of like gender roles, and we're still expected to be wives and mothers and things like that.
This week, I believe it was the Ragening this week, that'll be coming out this week, or came out on Sunday. This Sunday, I covered a study. So something was paid for by an institution, passed peer review, had the academic stamp of approval, and was publicized in media. A study on how men's friendships threaten their heterosexual relationships with women. If you can find me a study that says that women's relationships with women threaten their heterosexual relationships with men and therefore are bad. The study even argued that homophobia, so it was almost subtly moving towards the idea that homophobia was a good thing because it prevented men from having too close relationships with other men that might threaten their relationships with women. This is where it was coming. The relationships that men had, their friendships with other men, was seen entirely in terms of how they did or did not benefit women. How they did not benefit women because men were not becoming husbands and fathers for women. You show me a study like that, and I will concede the point that women are equally pressured to be husbands and fathers as men are. Because we're talking about something that was funded by the government, tax dollars at work. It was approved by academia and it was published in media. That was literally saying the only consideration that we have for men is that they are ready or they are prepared to be husbands and fathers for women. The only consideration in all of this is the benefit to women. And if men's friendships threaten that benefit, well, then they are threatening. You show me pressure. You show me social pressure like that on women, and I'll concede the point that it's equal between the sexes. Until then, point to men in this fucked up game. Oh, wait. That's 3 points to men so far in this fucked up game. They suffer more of a rape culture. Point number 1. The spending gap. Doesn't matter how much a group of people earns if they are not legally entitled to the money. Or if the money is taken away by government and given to someone else. The spending gap, the government spending gap, the family court spending gap, and the consumer spending gap. And academic, media, and government pressure for men to man up and be husbands and fathers with no equivalent for women. Unless you can find me an article like that. Or a study like that. So that's 3 issues that you have brought up that actually prove that relative to women, men are disenfranchised. But let's continue with this.
So, no, we're always trying to dismantle gender roles. At the end of the day, that's really all we want is...
Incidentally, this is why men's rights arguments are superior to all other arguments when it comes to feminism. Because their main flaw is they have never looked at never looked at men's side. Never. So when you bring it up and you say, did you measure this? Of course they haven't. They just assume that Y is always greater than X. They've never actually measured why. And it's just baffling to them that anybody ever would. And they don't realize how intellectually dishonest it is to make a comparison statement, X is less than Y, without ever having measured Y. And yet, this is the basis of our moral framework in our society now. It's as irrational as it has ever been. Okay, continuing.
To really dismantle gender roles and make sure that, hey, you know what? If you are for example, in custody battles, like if you're the better parent, we want you to have custody. That's it. I don't care what your genitalia is or your gender identity. It doesn't matter. If you're the better parent, you get custody. If you make more money, then you have to give out the alimony. That's it. That's what it is, right? So, there's still a lot of discrepancies between men and women. And the idea that feminism is no longer relevant, it's just, no. No.
The idea that feminism is no longer relevant because of these discrepancies in custody. Well, that means that feminism will never not be relevant, because feminism has and does, and successfully, mind you, opposed every shared parenting bill everywhere. And in fact, it was proto-feminist suffragettes who proposed that custody should go to women. Is that patriarchy, or the suffragettes' patriarchy? Are all the feminist organizations, including in Canada, the group of feminist women lawyers, the Women Lawyers Association, which is a feminist association, which was the ones who were most recently responsible for blocking leading ladies for shared parenting bill and preventing it from going forward? Are they patriarchy? Is that feminist organization patriarchy? Is the National Coalition or the National Association for Women, is that patriarchy? Because now certainly opposes the rebuttable presumption of shared parenting. All of these feminist organizations do. So if you're going to say that feminism will never not be relevant until custody is shared, is equal, then the fact that feminism is opposing that means they'll never cease to be relevant, because they're creating the patriarchy that they are said to fight. That's job security, folks.
So a lot of MRAs say that feminism doesn't fight for the rights of men. What would you say to that?
Crimea River. Oh, wait, I'm already famous for saying that.
In particular, you're famous for saying that to someone who was expressing concern over male suicide, and I believe had experienced a male relative committing suicide. So it was particularly egregious that you were, cry me a river and tell me who is this man who commits suicide so I can piss a river on his grave, sort of thing. You call it harassment. Other people call it calling out a horrendous human being.
No, really, because feminism is a movement about the discrepancies, like when it comes to women's equality, because we're still not there yet.
There is no such thing as women's equality. Just like if you have a statement X equals Y, it's not X equality. It's an equality statement. You have two sides. And to be equal, both sides have to be measured. I think that's really telling. It's about women's equality. Equality to what? Equality to what? It's only one half of the equation there.
And so when we create a space, our own space, to talk about our own issues and the things that we have to deal with, whether it be harassment or objectification or, income inequality, whatever the case may be, these MRAs decide to go trample on our parade and say, but what about the men's?
But what about the men's? When you make an equivalent statement, you have to measure both sides by definition. What about the men's? You should already have asked yourself. This is what's so amazing about feminists. Nobody should be saying, what about the men's to you? Because you should be saying it yourself. You are the ones making the equivalent statement. And every time somebody says, what about the men's, and you shout them down, you are indicating that you have only measured one side of your equivalent statement. and you only care to measure one side to your equivalent statement, it's fine. You only want to measure one side, fine. Then what you're advocating for is not equality. Stop using the word you don't know what it means.
I'm sorry. You have been taking over our politics and our media for God knows when.
Because anybody who brings up men's issues gets so much funding in academia and so much positive coverage in the media and so much support from government.
Like, since God knows when, I should say. So don't even start with that whole, oh, but you don't think about the men's issue. Well, then, you know what? Start your own goddamn movement, which they have, but maybe make it a little more about legitimate issues.
Yes, we have. We've started the other side of the equation movement, the weighing the why movement. And what has been your response to that movement? To vilify us at every single step as rape apologists.
Like custody and alimony and things that you think are unequal, which all stem from patriarchy, not from, oh my God, feminists are trying to take away our kids. No, dipshit. That's not what we're trying to do.
Again, if you got rid of feminist organizations opposing shared custody, we would have had it by now. I would say that is feminism keeping men away from their kids.
I mean, if they look at the root causes of why, for example, women get custody more often than men do, women are supposed to be the mothers. They're supposed to be the natural born caregivers. So obviously, you has a vagina, so obviously you're going to be able to take care of the kitties.
So instead of looking at the institutions that have a paper trail, have legislation proposed, legal briefs, receipts for receipts for lobbying efforts. Instead of looking at the institutions which have a paper trail indicating their opposition to shared parenting, instead of looking at that, we need to look at these amorphous social attitudes. We can't look at the people directly responsible for opposing shared parenting. We have to avoid looking at them. Don't look. No. No. Let's just. Oh, there it is. There it is. Over in that corner. Patriarchy. Yeah. There we go. Obviously, these feminist organizations aren't responsible for what they're actually doing. It's patriarchy. But not because they're patriarchy, because
that's really what it is. It all stems from sexism against women, and same with alimony as well. I mean, women were supposed to, back in the day, they were supposed to be making money and not they're supposed to be making babies and not money, and that those gender roles are still ingrained in our brain, and so and still in our judicial system. So it's not discrimination against men that these MRAs seem to think it is. It's discrimination against women, and consequently it negatively affects them as well.
No matter what feminists do, it's for equality, right? Even when you define what they've done as patriarchy, it's still for equality. Once again, I'm struck by the fact that this is so insane. How did this ever become anything? It's like we took the guy at the street corner yelling about apocalypse and someone stealing his bottle full of piss at everybody who passes by, and everyone's like going like this. This is the usual response to people like this, is just, okay, don't make eye contact. Get on with our day. Maybe we should call someone to make sure he's being taken care of, because this man is obviously insane. Or woman, let's call it a woman. This woman is obviously insane. She's got Mountain Dew bottles full of piss, and she's yelling about the Judgment Day because we don't take care of our cats or some shit, all right? It's obviously insane. And somehow in our culture, we've taken this obviously insane woman, put her on a chair litter, and elected her our supreme goddess empress of everything. And we are currently worshiping every word that comes. This all of this is that ridiculous. And once again, I'm struck. How did this happen? How did this make sense to anyone? I'm struck by that. I mean, there must be some serious shit going on in the human subconscious in the West that this ever made sense. That the crazy lady with a fucking bag full of string and Mountain Dew bottles of piss and cats everywhere, who can't even string a coherent sentence together, suddenly became the most sensible person in our society. And everybody's like, oh my God, she's brilliant. She's brilliant. Goddess Empress. All hail. This insanity. At some point, you gotta ask yourself, not what's wrong with her, but what's wrong with everyone else who elected her some kind of authority. Ugh. I'm not even talking about the emperor having no clothes. I'm talking about his court having no brains.
So that, I mean, we are, in a sense, not directly, but we are indirectly still working on their issues, but it's more like we're trying to dismantle patriarchy, which will then help them.
I'm just imagining like a raider coming on, like a farmer. Yeah, I set fire to your crops. So in a direct sense, I'm starving you, but in an indirect sense, I'm helping you get your crops off. I'm helping you harvest. Because, you know, you won't have to make the effort of harvesting after your crops are burnt down. Indirectly, you're helping men, but directly, you are burning their fields and salting them and pissing on the graves of their sons. You can justify anything by saying you're indirectly doing something. I can punch someone in the face and say I'm indirectly helping you by giving an excuse not to go to work tomorrow. This is the most...
So, anyways.
Big Red is insane. The one virtue the insane have is their certainty. They are certain that their gibberish is the absolute truth, an absolute reflection of reality. And if there's anything we're addicted to as humans, it's certainty. Class warfare between men and women, with men winning. This is what Big Red believes. This is what the belief system that created and supports Big Red believes. Another word for it is patriarchy. Class warfare between men and women, with men winning. This is gibberish, asserted with certainty by the mad. But this statement is Big Red's divine right of kings. The certainty that her belief system should be the one to rule, and by extension that we all bow to her. And I don't remember when this was decided upon, when it was decided that we cannot argue. We cannot argue the assumption that there is class warfare between men and women, with men winning. We can't argue with it here. If we can argue with it here, we can't argue with it over there. But when was it decided? In a time of systemic uncertainty, the insane become our rulers. Their edicts become our laws. And anyone who isn't insane is told to shut up. If you believe there's a place and time where class warfare between men and women exists, with men winning, then you believe it about all traditional societies, including our own traditions abandoned generations ago. What is that but complete abject concession to the leftist moral framework? All traditional societies are immoral, women-hating, woman-oppressing, woman-killing. All traditional societies should be destroyed. How could this be a conservative position? How could this position be considered separate from the left? It's the position of a supplicant to the god Empress, and return for their supplication, the god Empress feeds the right narrative. The right narrative. It needs to feel Western society better than all other societies. Why Western society is the best? Because the god Empress rules over it. We treat our women right, unlike those people over there, those men over there. Welcome to the eternal revolution of madness. Your ticket to the shit show is your belief that class warfare between men and women, with men winning, describes traditional societies. All traditional societies are thus evil. All societies not ruled by leftist sockjusts are evil. Only societies ruled by the god empress are good. Only societies in a perpetual state of revolution to remove all possible negatives for women are good. Otherwise, they're letting men win. And we can't have that. Not ever. If the leftists have convinced the right that women were horribly oppressed just 5 generations ago, they'll convince the right's descendants 5 generations from now that women are horribly oppressed today. The left leads, the right follows. You're all moving in the same direction, left and right, feminist and anti-feminist, the social justice warriors, the alt-right, all of you. All part of the same court, all subjugated to your chosen mad god empress. Class warfare between men and women, with men winning. The god empress proclaims, and you all bow down, taking her wisdom and applying it either to believing the West superior or believing yourself superior to everyone else in the West. And she presides over it all, the fulcrum for this endless merry-go-round. Faster and faster we go. You want out of this mad merry-go-round? You want off the wheel? You want out from the court circus? Then some hard truths are going to be laid down. A long time ago, I said I didn't want to take a living from this because I knew I would have to piss people off. And here I am, doing what I said I wouldn't. Basically taking a living from this. Well, I thank everyone who's got me this far. I pissed you off and you still supported me. All I can promise is to piss you off some more. And thank you for letting me. So why are we so addicted to certainty? That's a really good question. Maybe we should ask that question.